Man in the Pirates. Transforming into the 8 Devils. Introduction. On that day, in the sea area of the ruins of O'Hara, an ancient stone tablet carved with a mysterious stone statue was secretly salvaged. After leaving the seawater, the statue also opened his eyes. Alvin Lindsay. Wake up. Absorb the power of Renren Fruit, Huan Beast Seed, and demon form, based on the impression of the 8 demons, further developed abilities. The new era of that year. Dikui stirred up earth waves, howling winds blew tornadoes, and the thunderous roar of China and the Soviet Union. Ximu flapped her wings in the air, Basha stirred the sea, and Bogang stood shoulder to shoulder with the mountains. The Holy Lord swallows flames and curses blew to smash the moon down. Demon, Evan Lindsay, reckless on the sea, for freedom. Who are you in Chapter 1? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In the year 1506 of the Hyuan calendar, at the end. Punk has sad. Located in the latter half of the Great Root, it belongs to the world government and is used to detain prisoners. At the same time, this is also one of the research bases of the world's first scientist, Bergapunk. But now, Bergapunk is not on the island. The one who remains here is another scientist named Caesar Kurang, who has the highest authority on weapons of mass destruction. In addition to him, there are dozens of researchers and a small number of security forces. This defensive strength may seem weak, but it is more than enough. After all, not many people dare to raid the islands of the world government, and Caesar Kurang himself is also a natural demon fruit-capable person with strong combat power. Just in this vast ocean, there are always ambitious people who are good at seizing small opportunities. A small gravel, following the ventilation duct, infiltrated into the interior of the laboratory. Then there is more gravel, Clockdale. In the laboratory, Caesar stared fixedly at the man in front of him. He has a big back, a transverse scar on his face, an earring on his right ear, and a cigar in his mouth. Wearing a fur coat, the left hand is no longer there, replaced by a golden hook. That person is Crocodile, who had just set sail a few years ago and became one of the 7 martial seas under the king, due to his powerful strength. Caesar didn't understand why the other party appeared here. Wang Xiaoquihai is a legitimate pirate recruited by the world government, with an extremely special status, and there are still several vacant seats. They have a certain degree of legal plundering rights, and there is no reason to raid the research laboratory of the world government. How do you say it? Clockdale chuckled a few times and carefully considered his wording. At this moment, 2 members of the security forces discovered an anomaly and rushed into the laboratory, wielding knives and slashing at Crocodile. Shwa! Shwa! 2 knives fell, but only hit the already sandy body. This is the ability of the natural system. Sand fruit. Clockdale grabbed one of them by the neck, and in just a blink of an eye, he drained his body of water, turning it into a corpse. The other person couldn't escape, easily submerged by the emerging gravel on the ground. Caesar witnessed this scene. Although he was also a natural demon fruit expert, as a scientist, he could not defeat the practical fighter in front of him. Helpless, we can only move out of the mountain of world government to suppress people. Sand Crocodile, do you want to be wanted by the world government again? No. I was just trying to sneak around and find some secrets, but I didn't expect to discover more interesting intelligence. Clockdale's gaze was gloomy, as he raised his gaze to Caesar and chuckled softly. Caesar. Right. If I spread the news of my commotion here, you should be the first person wanted, right? As soon as these words were spoken, Caesar's expression immediately stiffened. What are you talking about? Stop pretending to be garlic. Clockdale said gloomily, you seem to have secretly transported something to this island behind the back of the world government and Bergapunk. I don't know. Caesar's confidence is getting weaker and weaker. Clockdale seized the opportunity and said, what did you find under the seabed of the original O'Hara site in the West Sea, and then brought it back. You plan to secretly study, right? After the words fell, Caesar broke out in a cold sweat, then locked the laboratory button and finally broadcasted a notification. The alarm is incorrect. There are no intruders, everyone should take their own responsibilities. Yes. A group of security personnel listened and no longer rushed to the laboratory. They all returned to their respective positions. Only Caesar was panting heavily, with a face of impending disaster. Because Clockdale is absolutely right. What is O'Hara? That was once a famous archaeological holy site in the West Sea. Later, due to the archaeologists on the island studying real history without authorization, the world government launched a demon-slaying order to completely erase it. In other words, nowadays the three words, O'Hara, are taboos on the sea. Any person or thing associated with O'Hara will be wiped out by the world government. And he, Caesar Charon, was not a good person by nature, often engaged in illegal research and even human experiments. Recently, his private exploration team discovered some strange things at the bottom of the original O'Hara. It's not a boring history book, but a more special one. Caesar wanted to decipher the secret and had it secretly transported to Punkhaz-Sad, intending to conduct some research. As soon as the research began, Clodagh broke into the laboratory. And Clockdale is also right. Caesar dare not report Clockdale's illegal behavior to the world government at all, because Caesar's current behavior is even more illegal. He, I thought I had nothing to gain this time, but I didn't expect it to be quite interesting. Clockdale took a sip of his cigar and puffed at Caesar. Why don't you show me your secret? If you're not interested, I'll naturally leave. What is he interested in? That is, of course, one of the three ancient weapons, the Hades King. Clockdale once found clues about the underworld, and as an archaeological holy site, the remains of O'Hara may be related to ancient weapons. Caesar stared at Clockdale and realized that this was troublesome today. I can't fight, I can't run. Only cooperation can be chosen. So he immediately put on a smiling face and laughed. Wow, I didn't expect the famous sand crocodile to be interested in scientific research. Stop talking nonsense. Clockdale was surrounded by gravel, always ready to take action. Caesar quickly shook his head and said, Okay, I'll show you now. He walked up to a wall and then pressed the button next to it, causing the wall to slowly rise and reveal what was sealed inside. Caesar grinned, his expression slightly stiff. But to be honest, when I first saw this thing, I was a bit trembling. Clockdale couldn't understand its meaning. Caesar Charon, this man, is also well known in the underground world and has developed many weapons of mass destruction. He is a complete warmonger. What is it that can make such a man feel trembling? Roaming and rumbling, the wall slowly rose, revealing the hidden thing behind it. Clockdale's pupils contracted slightly. Is that the main text of history? The so-called historical text is a special type of large stone that cannot be destroyed, and it is also engraved with ancient texts. But Clockdale quickly denied this speculation. Because the thing in front of me, although it is also a large square stone and the material is very similar to historical texts, there are no ancient texts on it. Instead, it is an exquisite, humanoid sculpture. On the stones of the main text of history, there is no ancient script, but a carved figure of a person. Clockdale looked at the person. That was a young man, nearly 3 meters tall, with open arms and straight legs, then crossed together. Clockdale is quite familiar with various arts, so he can assert that even the top sculptors on this vast sea find it extremely difficult to replicate this sculpture. It's too perfect. Whether it's expression, posture, movements, or muscle lines on the body, they are all perfect. That is the most primitive sense of power and dynamics of humanity, without any burden. Shoo, this is a wonderful and significant discovery. Caesar couldn't help but get excited. He is a scumbag, war dealer, weapons dealer, but also a scientist. On the stone of the same material as the historical text, there is actually a person carved. How did it happen? Why did ancient people carve him? More importantly, who is he? Even Crocodile, Yu reading www.uukangshu.net, couldn't help but freeze in place. He originally intended to threaten Caesar with a handle to expand his power, but he didn't expect to discover something even more astonishing. Are you afraid? Of course not. For an ambitious person, more secrets mean more opportunities. So. Clockter squinted his eyes and looked at the face of the sculpted youth. Who is he that can be carved by ancient people in the main text of history? There are some words under the sculpture that seem to be his name. Caesar saw that Clockdale was interested, so he relaxed and started playing with him as a new underground trading partner. But I'm not sure about the specifics, after all, I can't understand ancient Chinese characters either. Clockter furrowed his brows slightly and slowly approached, observing the line of characters below the sculpture. Murmured, "Who are you?" "I'm Evan Lindsay." The third voice spoke, and for a moment, the other two did not react. But in the next moment, both Clockdale and Caesar widened their eyes, sweating profusely. Who's talking? Looking for the sound, I saw that the perfect sculpture had already opened its eyes, and at the same time, its lips moved slightly, falling a few thin stones. His pupils turned and he scanned the two people in front of him. "I'm Evan Lindsay." The sculpture opened its mouth, with a slightly stagnant sound and a hint of doubt. "What era is it now?" Chapter 2. 1500. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What era is it now? Just this sentence made Clockdale and Caesar sweat even more on their heads. They are all the kind of people with extensive knowledge, but they have never seen such a scene before. And next, a scene that made the two of them feel even more eerie appeared. The sculpture claiming to be Evan Lindsay actually began to move its body. Starting from the fingers, then the joints of the whole body begin to tremble slightly, while tearing open cracks on the surface of the stone. Ka-la-la-la-la fragments of gravel fell one after another, revealing a body with an average skin color. Meanwhile, an indescribable aura instantly permeated the entire laboratory. Clockdale and Caesar were both shocked because they both recognized the truth behind that aura, overlord and domineering. The cracks in this sculpture burst out with a domineering aura. Can this stone also be called a king? Next moment, shwa. The sculpture leaped up and broke free from the constraints of the stones behind it, landing steadily with an unreserved appearance. Stones scattered around, and the chaotic and mottled domineering color gradually dissipated. As for the sculpture, his posture is like the most perfect human model, with no visible flaws. The sculpture carved in the main text of history actually came to life. I can't understand. And more importantly, what kind of monster is this creation from ancient times? Clockdale raised his hand to prepare for battle, while Caesar was already prepared to flee. The next second, the sculpture who claimed to be Evan Lindsay moved its steps and began to take action. Mix the left foot with the right foot. Puff. He fell heavily to the ground. Clockdale. Caesar. The two of them looked at Evan Lindsay with puzzled eyes. Is this person a child? Why can't he even walk? Wait a moment. Lindsay spoke up and slowly stood up, imitating the movements of the two people in front of him and readjusting his steps. With just a few breaths, Lindsay had already firmly established his footing and looked at the two people calmly. He couldn't conceal his inner joy, raised his hands high, bent his elbow joints, and excitedly said on his side. Okay, I can do it. Clockdale. Caesar. How do you feel? Something's not quite right. That was a sculpture from 100 years ago, created by ancient people, and even exuded a domineering aura. But why did his words and actions appear so normal when this sculpture came to life? The two looked at Elvin Lindsay. Evan Lindsay was also looking at the two people in front of him. Well, I recognize it. Crocodile, along with Caesar Quran. He probably knows what year it is tonight. Lindsay, full name. Evan Lindsay. Crosser. After observing for a period of time, he confirmed that he had come to the world of the One Piece. But now there are two tricky issues. One is that the year he traveled is a bit early. High Yuan calendar year. The era when the calendar was just put into use. Another is that he crossed over and became a stone. Located on an unknown high mountain, overlooking a small island, village, and the sea. Fortunately, due to being a stone, Lindsay's perception of time is very vague, and so it is, year after year, exposed to the wind and sun. Many, many years have passed. One day, Lindsay suddenly realized that he had been dug out of the mountains. What are they going to do? I don't know, so Lindsay vaguely observed everything. The High Yuan calendar lasted for 550 years. In that chaotic era, countries on the sea fought endlessly. As a hard giant rock, Lindsay's memory is slightly blurred, but he has also experienced many things. It vaguely remembers, formerly used by the nobles of the kingdom as the foundation for building palaces, also used as a weapon to smash city walls, a soldier died on it, blood flowing. There are also refugees who have been ravaged by the cold wind, hiding beside it, trembling and trembling. Warriors use it as a signpost, shouting out to the people. Some bandits use it to bury treasures and conceal greed. And to the year 620 in the High Yuan calendar. Another group of people took Lindsay away. They claimed to be members of the Light Moon tribe, from the Kingdom of Harmony, hoping to record their true history. So, Lindsay, along with other giant stones, was forged and beaten, eventually becoming many indestructible stone tablets. If everything is normal, then Lindsay's body should also be engraved with historical texts. However, history is always interesting. Lindsay can't remember the details. But in short, a young man asked the Guanyue clan for a stone tablet to do something else. Lindsay was taken to a certain place by the youth, and then he was carved into a sculpture in the shape of a human on one side by the youth. Somewhere, there is a group of people, facing Lindsay, earnestly praying. They crushed a demonic fruit into juice and applied it to Lindsay, seeking a response. I don't know how long they prayed, but Lindsay had a faint feeling. But at this moment, a huge roar sounded, and a towering wave struck, flooding everything around and leaving nothing behind. Lindsay sank to the bottom of the sea. He slept in a daze until the seawater around him faded away, and finally regained consciousness. Lindsay heard someone talking. Shoo, this is a wonderful and significant discovery. What kind of person is he? Who are you? At this point, Lindsay finally came to his senses completely. He didn't want to give up this rare opportunity and worked hard to seize the slightest feeling, ultimately causing the rocks on his body to loosen and break free from constraints. More than 1,500 years of stone life have made Lindsay forget how to stand. He imitated the movements of the two people in front of him like a child, and finally stood firm. There is light in my eyes. After calculating the time, he should have been a stone for 1,500 years. Although most of the time during this period was in a state of confusion, when the status quo of freedom was presented, Lindsay was extremely eager. What a great pirate era in 1,500 years. Lindsay urgently wants to take a look at this era that he is extremely familiar with but has never truly seen before. Lindsay is excited. On a whim, I started to move my body and enjoy the sensation of my skin passing through the air. This scene fell in the eyes of Clockdale, but it was somewhat difficult to evaluate. A straightforward man without clothes, a nearly perfect, living sculpture, actually started doing stretching exercises. The huge confusion made Clodal's mind a bit dizzy for a moment. But he quickly adjusted and wanted to learn more through Caesar. Hello, Caesar. Caesar. Clockdale saw no response and immediately turned his head, but where was the shadow of Caesar? Looking sideways, Caesar had somehow escaped from the laboratory and pressed a button to seal the entire laboratory. Hoo-hoo. The ventilation duct hummed, and a light purple gas drifted in, beginning to permeate the surroundings. Xiaoyuoyuo, I didn't expect so much to be gained today. Let me study it carefully. First anesthetize you, then slowly study. Sand Crocodile, could you please bear the charge of stealing the historical text and be imprisoned and pushed into the city for me? Shoo. He is indeed a scumbag. Watching the anesthetic gas slowly attacking, Clodel realized that this laboratory could not stay any longer. He doesn't intend to escalate the situation, and as a natural demon fruit expert, even the limited laboratory cannot trap him. Ken Caesar betrayed himself, leaving like this was not in line with his character. Do you want to study that, Elvin Lindsay? Then I'll take him away. Such a rare person must be involved in many secrets, perhaps also related to ancient weapons. He. Clockdale chuckled inwardly, turned his head again, only to find that Lindsay had also disappeared. Is that so? He looked up at the ventilation opening on the ceiling, but there was only a gap about the thickness of his fingers, which ordinary humans could never pass through. This is also the original infiltration route of Croctor. Clockdale exclaimed in shock, he has already entered the ventilation duct. No, I can't squeeze in. Lindsay's voice came, surprisingly located at the feet of Clockdale. The latter looked down and found that the floor of the laboratory had been torn open hard. Lindsay's body was immersed in it, leaving only one head, but he appeared calm and composed, as if swimming in the soil. Clocktor suddenly realized, are you the Devil Fruit Ability 1? Lindsay nodded and Yu read the book www.uukangshu.net. Yes. Clockdale wanted to know more information and asked, what fruit? Devil's fruit. Clockdale frowned slightly and said, I know it's the devil's fruit. I asked you, what exactly is it? Lindsay blinked his eyes, appearing slightly innocent, and said, yes, devil fruit. Clockdale's eyes twitched as he was about to scold, but suddenly he thought of something and couldn't help but freeze in place. Devil fruit. Lindsay nodded with a faint smile, lying on his back in the soil, like a tourist vacationing on the beach. Devil's fruit. Renren Fruit, Phantom Beast Seed, Devil Form. Lindsay blinked his eyes. Clockdale noticed that Lindsay's pupils had changed at this moment. 6 short lines are arranged in 2 rows, replacing the originally circular pupils, appearing very eerie. Lindsay continued to explain with his abnormal pupils. The person who carved me covered my body with the juice of the devil's fruit, slowly penetrating deep, allowing me to possess the power of the devil's fruit. Over the years, I have come up with many usage concepts, but ultimately lack practical experience, so I am not yet very proficient. At this point, Lindsay's body underwent a change. His limbs began to thicken, his skin turned deep red, and even 2 dark green ghostly horns appeared on his head. Such an alien appearance does indeed conform to the performance of Animal Kingdom mythical beasts. Lindsay's voice was deep and hoarse, and he grinned. The ability I am currently using is called Dikui. Also known as Demon of the Earth. Chapter 3. Freedom. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the near future, the world's #1 scientist, Vegapunk, will discover the ability conversion conditions of the devil fruit, ultimately allowing things to also eat the devil fruit and obtain different abilities. Note that it is discovery rather than invention. The called discovery means that it already exists, but there is currently no systematic summary of it. For this reason, in that distant and mysterious ancient times, a young man filled the sculpture with the juice of the devil's fruit, and ultimately made the sculpture eat the devil's fruit. Evan Lindsay has since become a sculpture with the ability of human fruit, phantom beast, and devil form. During that long time, studying one's own fruit abilities was indeed an interesting pastime. The development of demon fruits largely depends on the imagination of the capable individual. Many records have proven that if the same fruit is eaten by different people, the degree and direction of development will also be completely different. Devil. These two words lingered in Lindsay's mind, ultimately giving rise to the appearance of the 8 devils in his memory. Dikui, Xiaofeng, Zhongsu, Ximu, Basha, Bogang, Holy Lord, and Mantra Blue. They represent 8 different supernatural abilities. Earth, wind, thunder, sky, water, mountains, fire, and moon. The complexity of these abilities is beyond imagination. Even if an ordinary person is extremely poor for a lifetime, they cannot completely control them. Fortunately, Lindsay has just a little more time than ordinary people. A huge wave struck and Lindsay sank to the bottom of the sea. It is extremely boring, constantly imagining its own fruit ability during that long time, going through countless derivations, and ultimately extending a large number of theories. However, as a stone, Lindsay cannot put it into practice. Until today, Lindsay was no longer submerged by seawater and finally gained a human body. He has too many theories he wants to try. The first thing to bear the brunt was the impulse that surged up when he first stepped on the ground. Devil form. The demon of the earth. Dikui. The brownish-red skin has also thickened a few times, making it even more robust. Especially with 2 pairs of dark green ghostly horns growing on their heads, they fully showcase the characteristics of the phantom beast species. Phantom beasts. Clockter looked at Lindsay at the moment, feeling a slight fluctuation in his heart. There are too many strange stories and anecdotes in this vast sea. However, even so, a person who jumped out of an ancient stone tablet may seem too bizarre. But at the same time, Clockdale is also adept at seizing opportunities. The existence of Evan Lindsay is definitely a big news that can cause a sensation in this ocean. Clockter must seize the opportunity and make contact with Lindsay first. So, without hesitation, Clockdale gave up his original escape route and instead took action with Lindsay. Let's go. As a person with the ability of sand fruit, Clockter immediately elemental his body and crawled into the ground torn open by Lindsay. Lindsay also sank to the ground again, leading the way, with Clodel following closely behind. He carefully observed the way Lindsay used his abilities. Being in the midst of the earth, Lindsay was like a swimming fish, and all the soil and stones were fragile and unbearable in front of him. He could easily tear apart the soil and rock in front of him with his thick red hands, opening up an underground passage. Clockdale is pondering. Soil and gravel are similar to some extent. If we fully utilized the ability of sand fruits, initiate a cycle of erosion, absorb water from the surrounding soil, and turn them into gravel. So, Clockdale can also dig a path underground. But he is not good at it, so he wouldn't do it. About a few minutes later. I don't know how far Lindsay has been digging underground. Clockdale only knew that the lights in the laboratory were no longer visible, and the entire underground passage was pitch black. He could only transform his body into an elemental form, turning into a beach of gravel and closely following Lindsay. Wow! Lindsay suddenly reached out his hand and broke it upwards, separating the soil layer above the two of them. The sunlight from the outside shone on their faces. The two of them emerged from it one after another. Clockter looked around and found that the research institute on the island was already far away from the two of them. He was about to speak when he turned his head and saw Lindsay lying on his back on the nearby grass, breathing in fresh air. The current punk has not yet experienced Caesar's gas experiments or the battles of the two great generals, the pheasant and the red dog, so the environment is excellent, with birds singing and flowers fragrant. Huh, it's really enjoyable. The Dikui's form faded, and Lindsay's body returned to a perfect ordinary person. He lay back and laughed, the feeling of freedom is amazing. Clockter looked at this scene and felt that the other party was a bit too free. As a sculpture, Lindsay's body is comparable to the pinnacle of art masters, and the muscular lines are pleasing to the eye. But as a living person, Lindsay not wearing clothes. Lying naked on the ground like a perfect piece of art. But after all, the incident happens suddenly, where can I find clothes? Clockdale didn't want to waste his fur coat, so he could only endure that strange feeling and let Lindsay go. So the next step woo-woo. In thought, an alarm suddenly sounded throughout the entire island of Punkhasen, and a red signal light also lit up in the laboratory. TSK, that scumbag Caesar really dares to make things worse. Clockdale's brow furrowed slightly. Originally, I just wanted to grab Caesar's grip and further lay out the underground world, but due to the appearance of Evan Lindsay, everything began to derail. Who would have thought that the ancient stone tablet that Caesar salvaged from the sea had turned into a person? As soon as Lindsay leaves, Caesar can do some more maneuvering to directly erase his grip, and also threaten Clockdale along the way. However, it doesn't matter. He. Clockdale smiled sullenly. Just a mere Caesar, Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net certainly cannot compare to the value of Ivan Lindsay himself. Let's go. He waved to Lindsay not far away and said. My ship is on the southwest coast, I'll take you out to sea. Okay. Upon hearing these words, Lindsay's eyes immediately lit up. He has been a stone for too long, and now he has the opportunity to go to that vast sea, which is naturally beyond his expectations. With a strong waist and abdomen, a carp straightened and Lindsay jumped up from the ground. Just as he was about to follow Clockdale, but couldn't help but take a step out, the ground suddenly began to tremble. Clockter was taken aback and asked Lindsay, what did you do? No, it's not. Lindsay shook his head and turned his gaze to the direction of the vibration. Immediately, a deafening roar echoed in their ears. Roar. Lindsay and Clockdale looked for a voice, their eyes turned to mid-air, and they saw a huge figure swallowing flames. That was a huge red dragon with exaggerated teeth and wings, and it was this time that it was grinning and diving at high speed towards the two people on the ground. Shoo! Shoo! Caesar's laughter came, and the body made of gas also appeared not far from the two of them. He noticed that the two had fled the laboratory and chased after them all the way. At the same time, it also activated one of the many defense systems of Punkhasen. This is an artificial creature created by Bega Punk, a punk dragon. Shoo! Shoo! Don't rush like that, sand crocodile. Caesar smiled insincerely and said, why don't you do me another favor to test the works of Bega Punk? I know Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Caesar Quran, he's very unhappy. Super unpleasant. There are two main things that he is unhappy about. To put it closer, the existence of Evan Lindsay is definitely a new discovery that can shock the ocean. But Clockdale intercepted halfway and took Lindsay away. Unfortunately, the act of studying ancient stone tablets violated the laws of world governments, so Caesar was unable to call for naval support. I dare not make a big fuss, but I cannot defeat the sand crocodile myself. So Caesar could only watch helplessly as his great discovery was taken away by Clockdale. So he's very unhappy. Going further, Caesar was also unhappy with Bega Punk, who had been stabilizing his head. What is the world's first scientist? I am the true genius. The combination of two types of displeasure gave Caesar a quite refreshing idea. That is one of the defensive measures that activated Bega Punk's stay in Punkhasad. The Punk Dragon. The so-called Punk Dragon is an artificial biological weapon of the dragon type invented and created by Bega Punk. A certain Tianlong person seems to still like it very much, even giving it a name. This favor naturally made Caesar extremely jealous. So Caesar decided to use the reason of unknown pirate invading Pankazet to activate the Poke Dragon and deal with Clockdale. There are only two types of results. If the Punk Dragon defeats Clockdale, then Caesar can take the opportunity to reclaim Irving Lindsay, and if Clockdale kills the Punk Dragon, Caesar will report this incident as a misunderstanding, and at the same time, he will fiercely question the technical level of Vegapunk. With one move, it's perfect. Caesar can think of this aspect, and of course Crocodile can too. Therefore, the latter's face immediately darkened. He is unwilling to form enemies with the world's #1 scientist, but what's even more unwilling is to be used as a gunman. So, run. Clockdale thought this way and planned to forcibly leave with Lindsay. But when his gaze turned, he found that Lindsay was staring at the rushing dragon, his eyes shining. This recently awakened person seems to have a strong interest in everything in front of him. So, Clockdale's gaze sank slightly, and he came up with a strategy to turn the tables. He elementalized his body, flashed, and came to Caesar's face. He, do you like experiments? After murmuring a few times, he said gloomily to Caesar beside him, then I'll use what you have here to test him. Caesar instantly understood. Clockdale is trying to use the Punk Dragon in reverse to test the bottom of Ivan Lindsay. And whether it was Clockdale or Caesar, they all knew that the other party dared not really fight against them. So, for these two, it is natural for them to make use of each other. Clockdale and Caesar retreated to one side. Only Alvin Lindsay remained, raising his head and gazing across the air at the diving Punk Dragon. The roar of the dragon came. The roar that lingered in my ears was so real, no longer as hazy as before. Lindsay particularly enjoys this feeling. The courage of the enemy as they approached made Lindsay feel the beating of his heart, as if he had grasped life. Hello. Lindsay turned his head and shouted at the two spectators. He pointed to the Punk Dragon in mid-air and exclaimed excitedly, "Do you want to compensate if it's damaged?" This kind of personality is a bit too cheerful. Some people on the sea may like it, but Clockdale and Caesar are both relatively gloomy people, so they really don't want to respond. I understand. Seeing that the two of them didn't speak, Lindsay didn't hesitate either. Instead, he punched each other hard and hit them hard. He grinned and said, "Then I'll let go and fight." He has too many ideas to put into practice. There is also too much to learn. If there is a chance to fight against the dragon, of course it is highly sought after. Come on. Lindsay let out a low roar and once again activated the fruit ability. Dikui form. Two ghostly horns grew on his forehead, and his body became sturdy several times. He opened his arms, bent down to the ground, and looked up at the huge fire dragon that was diving towards him. Roar. The fire dragon opened its bloody mouth, and a blazing flame erupted from its sharp teeth. Who? The dragon has not yet arrived, and the flames have arrived. At the moment when the flames were about to engulf Lindsay, his hands vigorously lifted. The surrounding soil immediately rose up, forming a soil shield that blocked the flames. Dikui is the demon of the earth, possessing the power to control the land. Lindsay simulated a lot of usage methods in his mind, but in the end, he was still a little short. There is a high wall between theory and practice. So, with freedom, Lindsay is deeply fascinated by this precious reality. Okay, I can do it. Lindsay excitedly said, the flames are supposed to be blocked like this. With the power of his earthly form, he is able to lift a hard earth and stone shield to defend against flames and high temperatures. Lindsay was immersed in the joy of turning theory into practice. Turning his head, he noticed that Caesar and Clockdale's expressions were not quite right. There is a sense of astonishment and strangeness. How? Lindsay was about to ask a question, but before he could finish speaking, he had already sensed the answer. The punk dragon is still diving. After the flames were sprayed, there was a fierce impact of the nearly 100-meter massive body. Boom! Under the influence of weight and acceleration, the Earth shield was instantly destroyed, and Lindsay's figure was also submerged by the huge punk dragon. Wow! Smoke and dust rose everywhere, and the body of the punk dragon propped up its massive head, roaring in anger. Roar! He has already crushed the invaders and is declaring his victory. What the hell is he up to? Clockdale looked at this scene in astonishment. Did a magnificent animal-type phantom beast be killed by an artificial giant dragon like this? And judging from his performance, Clodagh discovered an obvious problem. This man named Evan Lindsay is extremely lacking in practical experience. What kind of person is it? Surprisingly, after blocking the opponent's first move, he was overjoyed and completely forgot to guard against the opponent's backhand. It's really disappointing. Clockdale snorted coldly and was about to step forward to deal with the punk dragon. But in the next second, amidst the diffuse smoke and dust, a figure leaped up and jumped high above the punk dragon. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. It's Evan Lindsay. In his earthly form, his body remained as free as ever, while holding on to a huge long rock hammer with one hand. The soil solidifies and its hardness is no less than that of steel. Aiming at the head of the punk dragon and slamming it down. Ha! Bang! A dull sound came, and the punk dragon couldn't dodge at all. It received a solid blow. The supernatural power in the form of the Dikui was completely infused into the head of the punk dragon through a heavy hammer. Longan flipped upwards, foaming at the mouth. There was an extra pit on his head, and his huge body fell to the ground with a loud crash, dying beyond endurance. Clack! Lindsay's figure fell steadily and stepped on the huge body of the dragon. The form of the ground leader gradually dissipates. In his normal state, there are no scars on his perfectly curved body. Then, he swung the heavy hammer with one arm and carried it on his shoulder. I patted the gray on my hair, and a dark red light flickered deep in Lindsay's pupils. There were even a few unrecovered fangs in his mouth. That should have been a ferocious and terrifying face, but due to Lindsay's simple and happy expression, it highlighted a bit of purity, and even more unusual. He excitedly smiled and said, So the dragon wants to kill like this. Looking down, looking towards Crocodile and Caesar not far away. Spit out a faint blood foam, looking sunny and brilliant. Okay, I can do it too. After finishing a sentence, both Clockdale and Caesar couldn't help but have the same question in their hearts: what exactly did they release? Chapter 5. Simplicity and Purity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The blazing flames have not yet completely extinguished. But the punk dragon, which spewed out flames, had its head smashed and its body lying on the ground. Caesar was stunned, constantly replaying the appearance of Lindsay in his mind. Red skin, thick limbs, sharp fangs, dark green ghostly horns, and pupils that sparkle with strange red light. He himself also likes to wear decorations like Devil's Horn, but compared to the appearance when Lindsay activated his abilities, it is really a bit out of place. Just now, Evan. Lindsay, it's like the real one in the legend, Devil. Caesar murmured. He didn't know about Lindsay's past, let alone the fact that Lindsay's appearance was carved out. The sculptor's skills are too superb, just like a living person sealed into a stone statue. Yes, seal it. Caesar's intelligence was incorrect, so a terrifying conjecture suddenly came to mind. There is no one else to share, so I can only say it to Croctor next to me. Shoo ho 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 ho. Caesar smiled reluctantly and murmured to his side, "Hey, sand crocodile, there should be some reason why ancient people sealed Irving Lindsay on a stone tablet. Think carefully and be extremely afraid." However, Clockdale still values the present more. Unlike Caesar's doubts and fears, Clockdale just took a sip of his cigar and said with a gloomy smile, "Is that so?" "What?" Upon hearing these words, Caesar was instantly terrified, and a chill surged through his mind. Subconsciously, the elements transformed his entire body into a pool of pale purple gas. In the next moment, a sharp sword made of gravel rose from the ground, splitting the gas in half. "Sand crocodile, I'm talking to you well." Kaisa angrily said, "That humanoid creature, claiming to be Alvin Lindsay, may be as dangerous as ancient weapons. I can't bear the responsibility of releasing him. It makes sense, but it has nothing to do with me." Clockdale's eyebrows were high, and he already had a plan in his heart. Based on the observation just now, he has roughly understood some of the characteristics and personality of Alvin Lindsay. At first glance, Lindsay appeared to lack practical experience and his movements appeared unfamiliar and clumsy. As an animal-type beast with the ability, Lindsay has a great fault tolerance rate in combat. At the same time, he also possesses extremely strong learning abilities. Not only did he quickly learn how to walk and retreat, but he even fabricated a rock and stone hammer out of thin air in the battle with the punk dragon, successfully making weapons. This person. No. The potential of this creature is absolutely terrifying. But more importantly, Alvin Lindsay seems very simple, and if it can be used well, it will definitely be a useful chess piece. So, Clockdale took the opportunity to ambush Caesar, forcing him to retreat. He waved to Lindsay again and shouted, "Hey, come with me." "Ha!" Lindsay laughed excitedly and closely followed the sandstorm. The two of them quickly arrived at the southwest coast, one in front and one behind. Croctor's ship docked there. It was a medium-sized sailboat. Lindsay's feet stepped on the beach, feeling the soft touch. He hasn't played enough yet, so he looks back at the island with an expression of still wanting. Are there no pursuers left? Caesar didn't have the courage. Clockdale casually waved his hand and explained, "Your research is seriously illegal." He dares not make a big fuss about it. At most, he will pin the death of the punk dragon on my head. I see. Lindsay nodded and looked at Clockdale with interest, without further ado. Upon seeing this, Clodel felt that his plan had become increasingly smooth. They boarded the ship one after another. There are no other crew members on board, but for those with natural abilities, operating the ship alone is easy. Shaw's ability is activated. The overflowing gravel untied the sail of the ship, allowing the whole ship to quickly sail away from Punk Hazad. Before long, Punk Hazad was no longer visible. In order to avoid Caesar's pursuit, Clockdale changed direction and traveled a distance, which slowed down the ship's speed. He found a spare coat from the cabin and threw it to Lindsay on the deck. Seeing that the other party had finally put on a piece of clothing, Clockdale finally found it pleasing and decided to lean back against the mast. Now, he wants to persuade Lindsay to use this unknown creature. Looking up, Lindsay was lying on the side of the boat, gazing at the deep blue sea, as if he was full of interest in everything. Clockdale's gaze moved and he exclaimed, "Are you curious?" Lindsay turned around and said, "What?" Clockdale said, "Are you curious about this ocean and this world?" Upon hearing this, Lindsay smiled and his gaze towards Clockdale became increasingly interested. He nodded and said, "Of course." He, that's great." Clockdale held his cigar and smiled faintly, "Since that's the case, then follow me. As one of the 7 martial seas under the king, I will take you to experience everything on this vast sea. The so-called 7 martial seas are recognized by the world government as non-legal individuals due to their strong strength, and there are still several vacancies to this day. Clockdale clenched his right fist and said with a deep smile, adventure. Treasure. Status. Woman. As long as you come with me, you can experience everything. How about it? After finishing these words, Proctor carefully observed Lindsay's reaction. Some unexpected. Lindsay, who had previously shown extreme simplicity, did not show any excitement, nor did he show any further curiosity towards those words. He was just wearing that coat and walking barefoot on the deck, slowly reaching the edge of the ship. The voice is calm yet clear and transparent. Crocodile, crocodile. Lindsay looked back at Clockdale, with his back facing the sunset, and the light outlined the contours of his body. He smiled faintly and said, I have spent a long time as a stone, monument, or sculpture. After too long, I have seen too many. So for me, everything you say is actually not what I first crave, those are just accessories. The only desire that interests me is one. Lindsay stood with his back to the sunset. Freedom. Two very simple words. Also, is it Alvin? Lindsay's only desire. The things that Clockdale said may be beautiful, but they cannot satisfy Lindsay's only desire. Freedom. Clockdale murmured. He suddenly realized that he had miscalculated something from the beginning. That's named Evan. Lindsay's creatures are not at all pure. The so-called simplicity refers to those inexperienced people, who are inexperienced and inexperienced. If they go through a lot, simple people will become more complex and become the majority at sea, and if this complex person goes further and goes through many more experiences, they still retain their original intention. So such a person can be called pure. Without a doubt, Alvin. Lindsay is not pure. Reading www.uukangshu. Net is truly pure. Such people are the most troublesome. I won't be swayed by the words of others, I have my own way of doing things that others may not even understand, but I must also walk my own path to the end. This kind of person, or organism, of course, cannot be at the mercy of Clockdale. I see, I understand. Clockdale let out bursts of low laughter. He lifted his eyes to look at Evan with the backlight. Lindsay changed his original plan in his heart. Next moment, song. Clockdale stomped his foot and turned into a sandstorm, charging towards Lindsay. The figure flashed, and Clockdale was already close to Lindsay, with a gloomy voice coming in. Let's fight until you're satisfied, or turn you into a pile of stones again. The small gravel constructed a sharp curved knife. Clockdale twisted his body and stabbed Lindsay's neck. Shwa. Lindsay clenched his fist, bulging muscles in his forearm, and slammed it hard against the blade. Bang. With a muffled sound, the gravel curved blade was smashed and scattered, and gravel permeated the surroundings. Lindsay and Clockdale, their eyes pierced through the gravel in mid-air and collided. Lindsay excitedly smiled and said, okay, the phantom beast species can indeed enhance defense. Hee. Upon hearing these words, Clockdale realized that he had been looked down upon and instantly became furious. Immediately, he lowered his face and gritted his teeth, coldly saying, You primitive person. As soon as they started fighting, they called them primitive people. Chapter 6. Practice and Progress. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Today, Clockdale misjudged 2 points. Firstly, what Caesar secretly salvaged was not the remaining information of O'Hara, but a stone tablet engraved with a sculpture. That sculpture eventually survived and became a primitive person. Secondly, it is about the personality of the primitive man, Alvin Lindsay. Lindsay's initial, learning to walk, made Clotal mistake Lindsay for a simple child. But in fact, that long time had already transformed Lindsay's simplicity into purity. That is the most challenging personality in this vast sea. Clockdale was unable to control him, so he planned to take a step forward to solve him in order to prevent bigger accidents from happening. So, now Croctor is very unhappy. So, now Evan. Lindsay, it's amazing. During that long period of over 1,500 years, Lindsay almost lost his ability to perceive the outside world. He constantly envisioned his fruit ability, extended a large number of theories, and also sought a channel for venting. And now, when he once again uses his 5 senses to experience this world, everything seems so precious. The fragrance of soil and grass, sunshine, sea breeze, beach, rough deck, even those that others cannot understand, the scorching flames burn the body, causing stinging pain, the impact and vibration received by the dragon's frontal impact, injury is certainly not good, and the pain is also uncomfortable. But Lindsay is still very happy. The feedback from those 5 senses, and even the ups and downs of his heart, gave Lindsay a feeling of being alive. The so-called freedom should be like this. Therefore, when Lindsay clenched his fist and smashed Clockdale's gravel machete with his forearm, the first thing he felt was not a sharp pain, but joy. What a pleasure. The punk dragon appears slightly weak and is only suitable for appetizing before meals. In contrast, the sand crocodile in front of us, crocodile, is fully capable of calling it a staple food. La 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 la, the gravel curved blade shattered and scattered into countless fragments. But these sand and gravel that were supposed to land mysteriously suspended in mid-air, presenting a stagnant state. In fact, these are not the conventional meaning of gravel, but a part of Clockdale's body. As a natural sand fruit cultivator, Croctor possesses the special ability to sand all the elements in his body, which in turn leads to various moves. But he didn't raise it because of it. As early as in Punk Hasid's laboratory, Clodal had a preliminary experience of Lindsay's fruit ability. Zoological, phantom, demon. The so-called devil is a creature that exists in fantasy, and its ability is unknown. The ability exhibited by Lindsay, also known as the demon of the earth, seems to be related to the earth. Cracking the ground, quickly excavating underground passages, and solidifying soil into hard weapons. All of these cannot be separated from the earth and soil. Therefore, it was not until the two of them boarded the ship and moved away from the island that Clockdale began to test Lindsay. Without soil, even if you are a phantom beast, most likely only brute force remains. Although their abilities are similar, as a natural person, they can control every inch of their body with ease. Clockdale let out a low cry. Open your right hand and gently tap downwards, causing the suspended gravel around you to fall to the ground, then firmly grip your 5 fingers. Zheng. An extremely sharp gravel sword rose from the ground and stabbed towards Lindsay's side waist. This move is not just sharp, the key is fast. Lindsay didn't even have time to transform into a ground monster form, but the battle theory that had been repeatedly conceived over the years came into play at this moment. He exerted force on his legs and leaped high in the direction of the diagonal thrust of the gravel sword, rotating his body simultaneously, resolving most of the force on the blade. The sharp gravel only cut through Lindsay's skin and oozed a few drops of blood. But Clodal's attack did not end. Let me teach you one more thing, primitive man. Clocktor spread out his right hand, on which a tornado-shaped sandstorm gathered, intensifying. He aimed at Lindsay in mid-air and sneered. If you don't have the ability to fly, you are a living target in the air. Shwa. Clocktor swung a sandstorm with force. Shalon. If this move is used in the desert, the sand mist will extend infinitely and eventually transform into a huge sandstorm capable of destroying everything. Now on the ship, Shalon's power has greatly decreased, but it is also enough to break up the skeleton of an ordinary person. As for the animal series, at such a close distance, I believe I will not die but also suffer serious injuries. Who? Shalon swung and hit Lindsay's body. He flew backwards and crashed heavily into the cargo hold at the stern of the ship, sinking into it along with broken pieces of wood. Smoke and dust are rising everywhere. Clockter squinted his eyes and looked through the diffuse smoke, only to see a scene that he couldn't understand. Alvin Lindsay successfully unleashed his fruit power. Ghost horns grew on his head, his body grew larger, and his pupils emitted a strange red light. These are quite understandable, at most even if it's the speed at which Lindsay's activation ability is relatively fast. The key issue is that apart from the thin scar on his waist, Lindsay's body did not show any scars, as if he had never been hit by Xiaolon. Why? Clockter's face was full of confusion, and he also heard the sentence that had been said several times, "Okay, I can do it." What did he know again? Lindsay exclaimed excitedly, "So sand is also a part of the soil." Before he could finish speaking, a few drops of cold sweat had already sprouted from Clockter's forehead. What does Lindsay mean by this sentence? Xiaolon once again gathered in the palm of Clockdale's hand, and he said coldly, "Don't tell me, you can even control the sand." Shwa. Xiaolon swung again, this time with even greater power, ready to completely destroy Lindsay. What greeted Xiaolon were two hands with red skin. Lindsay raised his hands high, leaned his back against the ruins of the cabin, and directly grabbed the tornado-shaped sand mist, making it unable to move an inch. Control. No, no, no. Over the years, theories that had been conceptualized countless times in his mind began to emerge, and Lindsay quickly realized the loophole in Clockdale's statement. The ability of sand fruit is to control the gravel and control it. But Dikui is not. Lindsay's brain was rapidly running, and through the current practical experience, more theories from earlier times were organized and formed. In other words, Alvin Lindsay is practicing theory and still advancing at an astonishing speed. The ability of the Earth's Kui form is essentially the destruction of the element Earth. Tearing apart the earth and digging through channels, squeeze the soil and forge weapons. Okay, I can do it. Lindsay's 10 fingers suddenly exerted force, and surprisingly squeezed out several cracks in the stormy state of Xiaolon. In the blink of an eye, Xiaolon was about to be torn apart by Xingsheng. Clockter saw the situation was not good and immediately swung out 2 more sandstorms, borrowing the wind and gravel from them to repair the parts damaged by Lindsay. This is an endurance race. Lindsay attempted to destroy Clockdale's sand, while Clockdale continued to intensify. Q, who would be the first to struggle? Answer. Ship. Click. A crisp cracking sound caught the attention of Clockdale and Lindsay. The two of them withdrew their hands at the same time and looked towards the middle part of the sailboat. It turned out that there was too much noise during the recent confrontation between the two, and Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net tore the keel of the sailboat, which is about to sink. Clockdale. Lindsay. Not good. Night falls. Clockdale and Evan Lindsay crowded onto a small lifeboat. Under the moonlight, they watched as the sailboat sank completely. The two lay on one side, with a slightly stiff atmosphere. After a moment, Lindsay looked at the night sky and suddenly burst into laughter, saying, "It's really interesting. Let's fight again when we have time." "Forget it." Clockdale felt exhausted and reluctantly covered his eyes, letting out a long sigh. Lindsay's personality is really beyond his control. The battle between the two was forced to end when the keel of the sailboat suddenly broke, which was supposed to determine the winner with a burst of anger. If we continue to fight, both of them demon fruit powerhouses will drown in the sea. Clockter originally intended to suppress Lindsay and force the other party to obey, but currently it seems that neither side can do anything about it. Not to mention, they are all capable individuals on the same boat now, and if the boat capsizes, they will die. Helpless, Clockdale had to propose, go to the next island first, and then make plans. Okay. Lindsay nodded and then leaned against the edge of the boat, continuing to look at the stars. Clockter was flipping through the recording pointer and chart to determine the position of the two. As I watched, I suddenly heard Lindsay muttering to himself. Unfortunately, the way to deal with Shog's ability is almost done. The sea breeze at night is very cold. Clockdale shivered uncontrollably. Chapter 7. Primitive Man. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After battling the creature Evan Lindsay, Clockdale understood one thing. Is the most challenging aspect of Lindsay's combat effectiveness. No. Jokes, just a few hours ago, he just learned how to walk. Even if he has the advantage of the demon fruit of the phantom beast, how much can his combat power be increased? What makes Lindsay truly tricky? Even terrifying? Is its amazing learning ability? Or rather, as a living organism evolution speed. Clockdale couldn't describe that feeling. It's like there's always potential to be tapped, unable to figure out the opponent's upper limit. Ha ha. Lindsay's laughter came through. Clockdale showed some impatience and immediately closed his eyes to rest, while also pondering repeatedly in his mind. If it were on land, neither he nor Lindsay would be at risk of falling into the sea. What would happen if both sides continued their recent battle? Is it because of his fierce offensive that he directly suffocated Lindsay with a single blow? Or did Lindsay's evolution speed be faster, which in turn cracked his own moves? It seems possible. But Clockdale was not curious about this result. After all, he was not just a naive person who had just set sail. A few years ago, he drew with Douglas Barrett, the Devil's Heir, and was defeated by Whitebeard. Finally, he was recruited by the world government and became one of the 7 Seas of War under the king. This experience has made Clodel's style of action more stable, always liking to plan before taking action. At least for now, Evan Lindsay is still invincible and there is no need to take the risk of letting Lindsay continue to evolve and fight to the death. Then let him do whatever he wants. Clockdale flipped through the chart, confirmed the direction of progress, and then picked up the oars to start rowing. Lindsay watched this scene with great interest and was eager to try. Tisk, just a paddle, you primitive person, don't come and cause trouble. Of course, Clockdale was unhappy rowing for Lindsay. But at the same time, he also didn't want Lindsay to damage the oars, causing the two capable individuals to have to row by hand. Anyway, I'm going back to the amusement park, which is the first half of the Great Voyage. Clockdale explained. But on second thought, the primitive person in front of him probably didn't understand the structure of the world today, so he added it casually. The sea area we are currently in is called the Great Root, specifically located in the second half of the New World, while the first half is called the Paradise. In addition to the Great Voyage, this world has been divided into 4 sea areas by the Red Soil Continent. Such clouds and so on. Clockdale gave Lindsay a rough introduction to this world, such as the Age of the Pirates, the Great Seas, the Red Earth Continent, the 4 Seas, the Windless Belt, and so on. Of course, Lindsay knew all of this, but it was rare for anyone to speak with him, so he also reviewed these pieces of intelligence. As for Clockdale, he certainly wouldn't be a good person for no reason, as these words actually have a purpose. When explaining the world to Lindsay, he focused on the world terrain. There are rumors at sea that the 2 windless zones that sandwiched the Great Root were the hands of ancient weapons. If Alvin Lindsay really knew intelligence about ancient weapons, he would definitely react to changes in the world's terrain. Clockdale carefully observed Lindsay's expression. When Lindsay said, "The Windless Belt is the nest of giant sea kings," his head suddenly trembled. Is that it? Clockdale's gaze trembled as he was about to inquire further, only to find Lindsay lying on the edge of the boat and falling into a deep sleep. Clockdale. A few veins burst out on the forehead. It is indeed a personality that makes me very unhappy. If it weren't for still having a glimmer of hope for this primitive intelligence, he would really want to throw Lindsay directly into the sea. Clockdale rowed a boat all night. Until dawn, I finally saw the towering red Earth continent from afar. Along the edge of the Red Earth continent, a very large port appeared at a further distance. This port was established by the world government and serves as an official channel connecting the front and back sections of the great shipping route. Therefore, this place is only used for transportation and not developed into a port town. Clockdale looked at the dock and let out a gloomy sigh. Finally arrived. Hard work. Nothing. Nothing. Lindsay, who had slept all night, finally woke up. Clockdale's corner of the eye twitched, trying to suppress his inner displeasure. After all, this is the territory of the world government. Although my identity as Kawaii is legal, there is nothing wrong with being low-key. Dock. The two of them got off the small boat one after another. Subsequently, Proctor directly activated his ability to sand the small boat, causing it to sink completely into the sea, leaving as little trace as possible. Study hard. Seeing Lindsay's gaze slightly puzzled, Clockdale's displeasure in his heart was finally diluted a bit. Anyway, we need to change the ship, leaving the old mode of transportation only adds to the risk. But Clockdale was too lazy to explain to Lindsay, so he simply perfunctorily said. Think slowly for yourself. Okay, I understand. Lindsay nodded, lost in thought. Clockdale's corner of the eye twitched and slowly said. To travel between the front and back sections of the Great Route, there are usually only two modes of transportation. Either change boats and follow the official route of the Red Soil continent, or venture down to the seabed below. Clockdale ordered himself a cigar. The official route on the Red Soil continent not only connects the Great Route, but also leads to other four seas. But if you are an illegal pirate, there are very few routes to choose from. So for pirates, once they embark on a great voyage, it is difficult to turn back with dignity in a sense. Either disguise as a refugee and flee without armor, or be caught by the navy. After a pause, Clockdale suddenly said. Of course, you can also choose to commit suicide and cross the windless zone. He still hoped to learn something from Lindsay, but the result was still in vain. There is indeed information about ancient weapons that can be encountered but not sought after. We can only make good use of the existing information in our hands and take each step to see. Looking at Lindsay, who was planning to visit the port well, Clockdale rubbed his brow. Hurry up, the world government is very strict, and here are only people rushing, and the caravans transporting goods dare not linger here. If you want to have some fun, just wait until you cross the Red Earth continent and go to the Shampoo Islands. The Shampoo Islands. Upon hearing this familiar name, Lindsay's mood improved significantly. The ports of Punkhausen and the Red Earth continent both feel lifeless, and the most anticipated tourist islands are those like the Shamhodri Islands. The two of them advanced along the same team. The identity of Wang Xia's 7 martial seas is indeed unique. They are big pirates that even the world government finds difficult, and no one wants to provoke them, so they have a green light and smooth sailing all the way. Quickly, the two of them had boarded a special passage on the Red Soil continent, covering most of the journey. Lindsay silently observed the way. Many chambers of commerce are queuing up to undergo routine inspections by government officials around the world to prevent pirates or prohibited items from entering. As they walked, a special caravan attracted Lindsay's idea. They are also caravans, and their trucks are not loaded with goods, but a group of humans wearing chains and shackles. Of course Lindsay knew, they were a group of slave traders, legitimate slave traders. Clockdale noticed Lindsay's gaze and took a sip of his cigar with a faint smile. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. Let me introduce you to this primitive person. In today's era, people have the potential to become slaves, and slaves are also a type of legitimate goods. Clockdale is not uncommon about this. He didn't care about the so-called slave trade, because that trade would only increase monetary benefits, but what Clockdale truly longed for was military power. Lindsay nodded lightly. As the two gradually approached, the noise of the slave caravan also came over. It seems that due to the long waiting time and the boredom of the slave traders, they began to vent their anger on the cheapest slaves. Pop pop. Whips were whipped repeatedly on the body of a young slave, leaving bloodstains. The young man knelt down and begged the merchant to let him go, but all he received was ridicule from the slave traders. Lindsay silently watched this scene, his gaze fixed on the others around him. The other slaves watched numbly, even feeling somewhat relieved that it was not themselves who were singled out to vent. As for the passers-by of other ordinary caravans, either it's ordinary or watching this scene with great interest, passing the boring time. Laughter and wailing mixed together, disrupted by numb gaze, and mixed into a puddle of mud. Hey! Lindsay suddenly grinned. Little crocodile, look at them. He patted Clockdale's shoulder, pointed to the nearby slave traders and more people around him, and smiled. I thought I was already primitive enough. Chapter 8. Traditional Plot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In his first encounter, Crocodile referred to Evan Lindsay as a primitive man. This is very reasonable. The existence year of ancient stone tablets is unknown, but they must be similar to other historical texts. In other words, the existence year of ancient stone tablets can even be traced back to before the blank 100 years, or even longer. Therefore, calling the awakened, humanoid creature, Evan Lindsay a primitive human is indeed an inexplicable thing. Based on this point, when the whip of the slave trader fell, the youth howled, and the onlookers were either numb or accustomed to it, and even a few were watching the excitement. Lindsay pointed to this scene and said that sentence, I thought I was already primitive enough. After the words fell, Clockdale also looked at the group of slave traders, and after a few seconds of silence, he couldn't help but laugh. He. It's really interesting, is this the high-level joke of primitive people? Clockdale was not concerned about the slave trade. But occasionally mocking those arrogant people can also be an interesting pastime. From this perspective, traveling with Evan Lindsay is not as unpleasant as expected. There are still many primitive things in this vast sea. Clockdale took a sip of his cigar and continued, you still. Before he could finish speaking, Clockdale suddenly felt empty around him. Turning around, where is the shadow of Lindsay still? Where did that primitive person go? The feeling of displeasure surged up again, and Crottleton felt uncomfortable. Looking down, as expected, beside him, on the ground where Lindsay had just stood, there was a noticeable crack. Don't even think about it, it must be Alvin Lindsay's pen. When launching the so-called ground monster form, Lindsay was able to tear open the ground and travel freely underground. The key question is, why does Lindsay need to activate his ability now? What is he going to do? Looking not far away at the slave traders still whipping the slaves, Clockdale seemed to have guessed the answer. That primitive person probably wouldn't want to cause trouble under the nose of the world government. Where are they now? Red Earth continent. This can be called the headquarters of the world government, and even a slight mistake can cause huge waves. Clockdale truly feels that his head is big. He just wants to know now how that primitive person is going to deal with those slave traders. We can't really have a direct conflict, can we? Clockdale's gaze twitched slightly. After careful consideration, he chose to pause his steps and hide in the nearby path, watching the changes quietly. Avoiding danger is not his style when encountering difficulties, and being confident like him always seeks opportunities as much as possible. Soon, the underground Lindsay began to take action. Clockdale could feel a slight vibration coming from the gravel under his feet. The vibration spread all the way towards the convoy of slave traders. The slave dealer was tired and put the whip back on his waist, lying on his back in the car seat. The others saw nothing to see, so they went their separate ways. Just at this moment, the tiny vibration came directly below a slave and then began to move upwards. Shwa! The slave had a big hole under his feet, and he disappeared without even making a sound. It's quite interesting. Clockdale savored the cigar and found it very interesting. Alvin Lindsay always has some creative ideas when using his fruit abilities. Allowing slaves to quietly fall underground and digging out a passage for them to leave is indeed a rather ingenious idea. And those slaves were all ordinary people, and the prices were also very cheap, so what locked them up was not explosive collars, but ordinary shackles. In this case, there is no need to worry about the explosion collar exploding underground. After a slave fell, the ground returned to its original state with no trace in sight. Slaves disappeared one by one, silently. Soon, all the dozens of slaves were gone, and the slave traders finally noticed something unusual. He widened his eyes and woke up the little brother who was dozing next to him, scolding, "Where are our goods?" My little brother's eyes were drowsy, and he looked around with a bewildered expression, saying, "I don't know." The slave dealer immediately became angry and widened his eyes, looking around. "Am I seeing a ghost?" Clockdale leaned against the wall and chuckled softly. Evan Lindsay is not impulsive, which is actually very good. Otherwise, relying solely on the revival of sculptures on ancient stone tablets, he would not have a peaceful day on this vast sea. World governments, navies, pirates, underground worlds, all major forces will try their best to find him, leaving him no breathing space. His evolutionary speed is certainly terrifying, but for now, it is ultimately difficult to compete with the entire ocean. So this little trick precisely proves that Alvin Lindsay is relatively rational. However, Clockdale couldn't help but feel a little curious. The slaves have already been taken away, why hasn't Lindsay come back yet? Hee, I can't just want to vent my anger on that young man who was beaten. Not good. Clockdale thought of this and immediately looked up. As expected. Under the cargo box of the slave caravan, two dark green ghostly horns suddenly appeared. Immediately, a huge mound of soil suddenly rose and shattered the entire cargo box. A huge monster emerged, tore open the wooden boards on its body, and erupted into deafening roars. Roar! That is a humanoid giant beast that is over 6 meters tall, with reddish skin and thick limbs. It has fangs in its mouth and its pupils emit a penetrating red light. Undoubtedly, it is Alvin Lindsay's zootomization of the phantom beast. The form of the Earth Queen. Lin Sai Ben is a physique full of perfect muscles. After being completely animalized at this moment, the power is even more astonishing. He directly caught the slave dealer and his little brother, and then, one by one, smashed them heavily to the ground, embedding them directly into the soil. The two of them had not yet realized what was going on, and there was no movement in an instant. This sudden change blinded Clockdale, who couldn't even imagine how Evan Lindsay would escape now. Can only crawl into the red soil continent and escape. In thought, the world government guards around had already noticed the riot and rushed over. What they saw was a tattered cargo box and a growling alien beast. Did the precious beasts of the New World escape? The guards were startled by Lindsay's appearance and quickly shouted, "Shoot it, kill it." The incident occurred in the red soil continent, and there is no room for any mistakes. Ordinary firearms have no choice but to deal with that beast. When a lead bullet hits the beast's skin, it can only leave a few scratches. Bang! Bang! After several rounds of shooting, the beast seemed to have been provoked and erupted into even more intense roars. Roar! It lifted several guards in one fell swoop and then charged forward all the way. Clockdale looked at this scene with a hint of helplessness. It seems that I cannot continue to travel with Alvin Lindsay. If there is such a big chaos on the red soil continent, even if he can run now, Evan Lindsay will definitely be targeted by the world government. Clodel has other plans in Alabastion, but he doesn't want to draw the attention of the world government. He was about to leave when he suddenly noticed something unusual. Alvin Lindsay's fierce charge turned out to be directly towards him. What does he mean by this? Clockdale's eyes twitched. What's going on? Before being wanted by the world government, did this primitive person still want to be a scapegoat? Clockdale wanted to run, but Lindsay's sprint speed was extremely fast and he had already arrived in front of Clockdale in an instant. Two people with four eyes facing each other. Lindsay didn't even say a word, but instead raised his fist and slammed it down at Clockdale. Clockdale could only raise his hand to block. But just as he raised his hand, Lindsay suddenly lifted his head and let out an extremely mournful scream. It feels like a wild beast imitating humans. The line that Yu reads from www.yuukangshu.net at the last moment of his life. No. Click. The next second, Lindsay's huge body suddenly turned into a pile of stones and then burst open. Clockdale looked at this scene in astonishment. But smart people like him quickly figured out the purpose of Lindsay's move. He turned his head and looked around at the world government guards rushing towards him, smiling gloomily. The result was that Clockdale was greatly thanked. In the eyes of those guards, this was just an ordinary wild beast out of control incident, and the slave traders were reaping the consequences of their own actions. As one of the 7 martial seas under the king, Proctor timely killed the beast, which was to help the world government. Compared to the other casual 7 armed seas, Clodal's move will undoubtedly enhance his favorability towards the world government. After receiving the gratitude from the guards, Clockdale left. He walked another distance and turned into a deserted alley. Tasting the cigar in his mouth, Clockdale raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled inwardly at his empty side, saying, "This play is too terrible." "Is that right?" Another voice sounded. On the ground next to Clockdale, a mound of soil rose up. Lindsay emerged from it, released the form of the ground monster, and then cleaned up the soil on his body. He shook his head with a smile and said, "But I still quite like this traditional plot. And the fangs are still there, and there is a slight residual red light in the pupils. It was a great smash." Chapter 9. Perfect Instinct. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a brief rest, the two of them continued to move forward. Along the way, Clockdale was pondering a question. Evan. Lindsay, what exactly is it? People. It seems impossible to assert so easily. Evan. Before awakening, Lindsay was a sculpture on an ancient stone tablet. The material of this ancient stone tablet is similar to the historical texts of the sea. The attitude of world governments towards historical texts has always been explicitly prohibited, and mere contact is a capital offense. For example, the once archaeological Holy Land of O'Hara just wanted to interpret real history, and the world government launched a demon-slaying order against it, erasing the entire island from the gunfire of naval ships. However, even so, those scattered historical texts at sea have not been destroyed. Is it that the world government doesn't want it? No, it's impossible. Proctor studied a historical text, and the forging process of this special stone tablet was extremely special. Even if he exerted all his efforts, he could not destroy it at all. Faced with this level of hardness, it is already difficult to engrave text on it. Why would someone bother to create a sculpture? More and more questions are emerging. Evan. Lindsay should not be an ordinary person, because humans cannot endure that long time. But he should not be a stone that has eaten the fruit of demons. Because Clockdale clearly remembers that in yesterday's battle, he slightly scratched Lindsay's waist, from which a few drops of bright red blood oozed. There is life. And non-human. Taking these two factors into consideration, will Crocodile ultimately defeat Alvin? Lindsay is defined as an unknown, humanoid creature. After all, this sea is too vast, and although there are few similar humanoid creatures, there are also certain records. And just now, witnessed Alvin. Clodal, who was involved in all of Lindsay's actions, became increasingly convinced of his speculation. Does the act of slave traders beating slaves make Alvin? Lindsay felt unhappy. But his performance was clearly different from those short-lived furry little ghosts, and he did not act rashly. But after secretly rescuing the slaves, he smashed the cargo box above from the ground and disguised himself as a beast out of control. In this way, everyone's attention was all drawn away by Lindsay, and no one went to investigate the whereabouts of the slaves. Lindsay himself remained in an animalistic state, colliding horizontally and straight, running towards the nearby Clodal with an attacking posture. At the moment Clockter raised his hand, Lindsay unleashed his animalistic ability and retreated back into the ground, leaving only a shattered shell. So, in the eyes of others, it was Clockter, one of the 7 martial seas under the king, who helped to deal with the out-of-control beast. For Clockdale, this level of strategy is very simple, even somewhat minor. But he also knows, Alvin. Lindsay just woke up soon, not even a whole day. In Crocdale's view, Lindsay did not understand the composition of this world, let alone the terrifying nature of world governments. But Lindsay actually understood the need to act in a low-key manner on the Red Soil continent, and even came up with a clever plan to escape. How did this primitive person do it? Instinct. After much thought, Clockdale could only provide such an answer. As a humanoid creature, Alvin. Lindsay has the instinct of seeking benefits and avoiding harm. He will follow his own ideas to rescue slaves and eliminate slave traders. I will also try my best to avoid danger and have a way to escape. Did Clockdale understand Alvin? Lindsay's personality also breathed a sigh of relief. Although he still couldn't handle Lindsay's personality, at least Lindsay wouldn't involve himself in big trouble. The evolution speed of this humanoid creature is somewhat too fast. The two successfully passed through the Red Soil continent. At the port on the side of the amusement park, Proctor casually bought a small sailboat and set sail with Lindsay. This ship doesn't need to be very good, and it doesn't even need to be replenished. Because as long as they sail for another half day, the two will be able to reach the last stop of the first half of the Great Voyage, Shambhodri Islands. That is a wonderful island composed of the roots of multiple large trees, and the special resin secretes a large number of bubbles, creating a unique bubble culture. This is an extremely prosperous commercial and tourist island, directly under the jurisdiction of the world government, but also has some illegal zones. I have booked a transaction on this island. On the deck, Proctor gazed at the Shampoo Islands and lit a cigar for himself. He looked back at Lindsay on the side and found that his opposite side's eyes were shining, in an extremely excited state, and he couldn't help but feel a bit dizzy. When this is over, I'll take you to Alabastion. There's something I want you to see. Alabastion. Lindsay blinked when he heard the familiar name. Of course he knows there. That is a superpower located in the first half of the Great Route, with intricate connections to both the historical text and the Tianlong people. If everything develops normally, Clockdale, the sand crocodile, will be stationed in Alabastion under the identity of the 7 martial seas under the king, helping to eliminate pirates and ultimately obtaining the status of national hero. But in reality, all of this is just preparation for controlling Alabastion and interpreting the historical texts there. Clockdale did indeed think so. His goal has always been one, and that is the ancient weapon. The king of the underworld. Once possessed by the underworld, Clockdale would gain unimaginable military power, capable of intimidating the entire ocean. I took a last-minute initiative to go to Punkhazad to find Caesar, also because I obtained relevant intelligence. But the final result was somewhat unexpected, as an island popped up from the huge ancient stone tablet. Lindsay, but after all, it has already come out, and I am not willing to check the clues. Clockter did not understand historical texts and could not interpret the main text of Alabastion history, so he decided to take Lindsay over to take a look, perhaps to discover some clues. If it still doesn't work, we can only try to find the only survivor of O'Hara, Alabastion. Lindsay murmured the name. The desert country is also one of the few superpowers on the Great Route. If given the opportunity, of course, Lindsay would like to take a look. But now, he is also very interested in the Shampoo Land Islands in front of him. Looking back at Clockdale, Lindsay grinned and said, "Little Crocodile, can I borrow some berry flowers?" Little Crocodile, listening to these 3 words, Yu reading www.uukangshu.net, Clodal's forehead erupted with several veins. But due to Lindsay's terrifying pace of evolution, Clockdale really doesn't want to fight Lindsay anymore, otherwise he will only become more passive. Let him go. Clockdale casually took out a stack of berry and was about to throw it to Lindsay. Unexpectedly, with a loud bang, a lead bullet hit the deck where the two were located. On the sea not far away, a pirate ship rushed over. They are a group of pirates who have just passed the first half of the Great Voyage and are about to showcase their skills in the New World. They are currently in an extremely excited state. In the eyes of that group of people, nothing can stop them, let alone just a small sailboat. The pirate captain stood on the deck, waving his knife at the 2 people on the small boat and laughing. "Yahahaha, today we're going to enter a new world. I'll take you 2 unlucky guys to offer our flags." Lindsay lifted his head and looked at the big ship. Eyes sparkle. He laughed and patted Crocodile's shoulder excitedly, saying, "Little Crocodile, look, it's a live pirate." "Ah, alive." Clockder bit his cigar and murmured. His unnamed anger had been suppressed for a long time, and now he needed an outlet to vent. So at the end of the previous sentence, he added, "I'll die soon." Sand and gravel churn. But before the first gravel touched the tip of the pirate captain's knife, a hand with dark red skin took the lead and grabbed the blade. The pirate captain looked up and saw a huge black figure leaping up, as well as those eyes flowing with red light. Chapter 10. I Want to Prove. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shampoo Land Islands, docks. Phew, boom. A roar came from the nearshore, and shells fell into the sea. The people on the dock looked over and saw a small pirate ship, which had launched shelling on another small ship. Everyone seemed to take it for granted. During the era of the Great Pirates, the Shambhodri Islands were a necessary route from the first half of the Great Voyage to the New World, and naturally, they were visited by pirates. Although this is the territory of the world government and there are many naval garrisons, many pirates choose to keep a low profile, but there are always those who are not afraid of death. In order to showcase their so-called courage, they even dare to plunder directly near the sea. The final result is nothing but 2. The less interesting ones are those who successfully plunder and are then caught by the navy while waiting for a rabbit. What's more lively is kicking the so-called iron plate. There are many interesting people on this vast sea, and there are always masters who enjoy going out alone, even just riding on a raft. If you encounter such people, the fate of the group of pirates will not only be to be caught. Today, what kind is it? Several fishing tourists took out their telescopes and observed carefully. There seemed to be a fight on the deck of the pirate ship, and there was a faint roar of some unknown beast that came to everyone's ears. It seems to be the second one, a more interesting situation. Hey, just in case, why don't you go find the navy first? Okay, I'll go now. Before long, the fighting on the deck came to a halt, and the nearby navy also rushed over. They observed with binoculars and found that the pirate ship was slowly approaching the shore, so they loaded the lead bullets and prepared for battle. If it were a low-key pirate, perhaps one could turn a blind eye, but the port is not an illegal zone and cannot tolerate pirate behavior. The pirate ship slowly approached. When there were still 200 to 300 meters away from the dock, an inexplicable sandstorm suddenly hung around. Countless gravel rolled and eventually converged into a human shape on the dock. He was wearing a dark green fur coat, holding a cigar in his mouth, with a golden hook in his left hand and a pirate captain's head in his right hand. The skin on the pirate ship was dry and only half of it was left, unable to say a word. The man raised his eyebrows and looked at the crowd of onlookers on the dock, unable to help but sigh. there are so many people watching the excitement. He is exactly crocodile. Just an ordinary pirate, of course, can't do anything about him, let alone have a eager elven Lindsay by his side. However, the sand crocodile's trip is not to make an appearance in the Shampoo Islands. Therefore, he left Lindsay's boat to dock and went to the island early to observe the situation near the dock. Looking up, I saw the Navy soldiers who were on high alert. It was the Navy stationed in the Shampoo Islands who had a wide range of knowledge and immediately recognized the identity of Clockdale. Kawehai. Why are you here? Sightseeing, can't we? Clockdale was too lazy to chat with these Navy soldiers and only wanted to get through this little incident as soon as possible. So, with a big wave of his hand, he threw the half-dead pirate captain over. Puff. The pirate captain landed without even the strength to speak. This is the pirate who attacked us. I'll give it as a gift to your branch here. Clockdale took a sip of his cigar, his tone becoming increasingly impatient. Upon seeing this, the captain of this naval squadron signaled to everyone to lift their guard. He recognized the pirate captain as a tricky character with a bounty of 29 million berry, and it was not easy to deal with. But Croctor was able to handle him so lightly, and the strength of Chiwu Si should not be underestimated. Quickly, take the person away. The captain commanded other naval soldiers while also staying at the end. He looked at Clockdale for a moment, but ultimately couldn't grasp the other person's thoughts, so he let him go. Tang Kawehai is naturally a person who understands the rules and will not cause trouble in the Shampoo Islands. The Navy left, and the onlookers dispersed. Although it is rare to see the 7 martial seas under the king, the other party is still a pirate, and ordinary people are unwilling to go and provoke them. Clocktor leaned against the railing next to him, smoking his cigar and silently watching the approaching pirate ship. Good luck. Although there are ports on the red soil continent that sell ships, the prices are extremely expensive, and it is impossible for experts to purchase ships there. Therefore, the small wooden boat purchased earlier was just a temporary means of transportation. Generally, people who are familiar with the sea conditions here will choose to buy a boat in the Shampoo Islands to continue their journey. But since there are pirates specifically coming to send their ships, it would be impolite to refuse again. Clockdale, now is the time to use money. He plans to secretly establish an organization called Baroque Studios in Alabastion, specifically to carry out his plans. Therefore, he needs to come to the Shampoo Islands for transactions in order to obtain the huge funds needed to establish the organization. If elven Lindsay cannot interpret the main text of history, then he can only go find her. Clockdale's gaze was low, contemplating the next action in his mind. Nicole Robin, the only survivor of O'Hara. Speaking of which, that primitive person was also salvaged by Caesar from the seabed of the O'Hara ruins. Has Nicole Robin seen him? Oh, primitive people. Clocktor murmured, suddenly feeling something was wrong. He seems to be too focused on low-key behavior, resulting in forgetting a fundamental question: can that primitive person sail a ship? Clockdale immediately looked up, but the scene that worried him did not appear. That pirate ship is safely docked, even more so than many experienced boatmen. Looking further, Evan Lindsay held onto the rudder with one hand and held up an entry-level ship tutorial with the other. He laughed excitedly and said, "Okay, I can take the helm now." Clockdale watched this scene, unsure whether to be afraid or feel speechless. Elven Lindsay's learning ability is terrifying, and once he gets started with anything, he is highly likely to master it in a short period of time. It seems we need to be more cautious. He has a certain similarity in fruit ability with Lindsay, so once he becomes enemies with Lindsay, the situation can be extremely tricky. Fortunately, that primitive person still had some common sense. At the same time, Lindsay also perfectly docked the pirate ship in the vacant space at the port. In this way, as long as someone replaces the black flag on top, you can sail all the way to Alabastion without buying a boat anymore. Clockdale stepped forward. He wanted to instruct Lindsay again, but just as he was about to speak, Lindsay suddenly made an incomprehensible move. I saw Elvin Lindsay jump up from the deck and onto the port pier. Immediately, the fruit's ability was activated. Dikui form. Lindsay's body began to swell, with terrifying and twisted movements. He clenched his crimson fist and slammed it into the body of the pirate ship, making a big hole. Then, with another forceful push, the small pirate ship was overturned into the sea, causing it to sink completely. This scene was extremely stunning and attracted everyone's ideas. The crowd at the port looked at Lindsay in order to come over. Little crocodile, take care of it. Lindsay slowly retreated from the animalistic effect, revealing his perfect muscle lines and flaunting his body to everyone without restraint. Like a master-level sculpture, every movement is flawless. Almost everyone is amazed, except for one, Clockdale. Clockdale. What are you doing? He asked in confusion. Lindsay answered candidly, okay, I can do it. Clockdale watched as the pirate ship sank completely, his expression even more perplexed. Learn what? Lindsay smiled and said, previously, at the Red Earth Continental Dock in the New World, you destroyed the small boat and let me think of a reason for it myself. Now I think of it. Lindsay moved his arm and Yu read a book www.yuukangshu.net, grinning, so, I just learned a little. Clockdale. 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 Fuck it. Elvin Lindsay is a primitive person, not a fool. He could definitely see that he had destroyed the small boat before to prevent Caesar from finding their trace. So what Lindsay is saying now is just a clumsy excuse. Or put it another way. Lindsay also noticed Clockdale's gaze, shrugged his shoulders, and explained. Organisms have the instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm, but at the same time, they also follow their own nature. I slept for too long. So, no matter when or where, I don't want to be silent. Whether it's the out-of-control monsters on the Red Soil continent or the masters who killed pirates in the harbor, these don't matter. Lindsay opened his arms and smiled excitedly, saying, I just want to leave some traces that belong to me on this vast sea. I want to prove one thing. In the depths of Lindsay's pupils, a strange red light flickered, even the ground beneath his feet began to tremble slightly. He said slowly, I want to prove that I have lived. Clockdale was speechless. He couldn't handle Elvin Lindsay's personality and seemed reluctant to argue with him about his reasons for going out to sea. In the end, he just turned around and frowned as he walked, saying, Don't forget yourself. Upon hearing this, Lindsay laughed even happier and took steps to follow Crocodile, laughing loudly. I have to be proud and forget myself.